Live from New York City, it's the Gary Null Show. And now, your host, Gary Null.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gary Null, broadcasting from our studios, New York City. This is going to be an empowering hour. We're going to talk about how curcumin, the active ingredient in turmeric, is able to help your brain. Also, we're going to look at 3 different cases of how you can help dementia using natural techniques, and that they're saying now officially, something we've been saying, you've been hearing for a long time, that dementia is preventable. That's good news. And I'll explain how you can prevent it. Right now, I'm looking at, it's an epidemic going toward a pandemic. The pharmaceutical industry wants to give you drugs that will not reverse it, have terrible side effects, and can merely ameliorate a few of the symptoms. Well, what about reversing it completely? Can it be done? I've done it. In fact, it's one thing to say you've done something, it's something else to take that person you did it with to a conference of scientists, skeptical as they should be, that's good, bring them out on stage, and have that person with end-stage dementia, 16 months after being on a protocol, and talk coherently, read from a guidebook, which they couldn't otherwise do. They couldn't even read anything. And the scientists are sitting there with their jowls hanging. Well, that was just the beginning. Now we're working with others and helping them as well. More on this coming up, but I'll get into that today. And also, the case is growing for something I've also said, and this is from University of Utah. They have found a link directly between happiness and health. And how many times have I suggested that you cannot be healthy if you're not first happy? Now you would think, well, what does one have to do with the other? Of course you can be healthy if you're not happy. No, you can't. Not if you're measuring health on the larger scale. And I'll deal with that today as well. And a lot more on health and healing, and all cutting edge, all from peer-reviewed journals, all from quality institutions, so that it deals with something that happened earlier in my career, where a physician was debating me, and I did not have credentials. I wasn't a medical doctor. At that point, I wasn't a PhD. I wasn't a research fellow. I didn't have honors, none of that I have now. I wasn't even a registered dietitian, as I am. Instead, I was just a very concerned activist, speaking on behalf of lay people, making no pretense, and simply sharing information. Never once, ever once in 500 plus debates did I ever attack the person, their integrity, their background. I don't believe in that. Instead, I simply looked at, here's your argument, now I have my own, and let the public decide. Afterwards, the host came over and he said, well, understand something. This is the South. It was in Georgia. And the host of this show out of Atlanta said, down here, you should know that that doctor you were debating, he comes from Coca-Cola. And they got a whole bunch of doctors that the moment you mention sugar's bad, soft drinks are bad, they're going to bring one of these people on saying, well, I'm the doctor, and there's nothing wrong with sugar, and you're just a person wanting to scare people, and you're an alarmist. They did it with the tobacco people. They did it with the asbestos people. They did it with the uranium. He's telling me all this. And he said, I just want you to know that I support a healthier lifestyle, but get yourself some credentials, and any time you bring any information, bring good quality citations, and let the citations do the arguing for you. So today, and since that day, over 40 years ago, every single show I do, you'll notice I give you the actual scientific citation, so you can differentiate something that is subjective, a person's opinion. They could still be right, but it's still subjective, versus hard quality evidence. And that's why we're considered a source of record, just like the New York Times, unfortunately, is considered a source of record. We are also, and that's why so many people, you have no idea how many people come to our website to read our articles, and we're getting more. And we just added a whole new element to our site. I'm going to start today. giving you the latest on the environment. Now, this will be surprising because you probably will not have heard or seen any of this in the media. But once you start being aware that this is happening every single 24 hours, then hopefully you'll start to become proactive and do some good things. Also today, by the way, I got a lot of comments from people saying, what are you going to do about the assistant or deputy attorney general, the person that oversees the FBI, saying yesterday on Gretchen Carlson's show on Fox that asset forfeiture is all done legitimately, that no one gets anything taken. If they do, there's a special court and they go to and get it right back. Those are all lies. I'm calling this man out, but I'm not going to call him out. I'm bringing in America's leading constitutional lawyer, scholar, professor on Monday's show. But I'm also bringing in other information from people who've actually been victims by the tens of thousands. How many? 66,000 Americans who've committed no crime, were not given a ticket, but had whatever they had stolen from them by the police. Now, is it a few $100s, a few $1,000, a few $100,000, a few $1 million? No, it's even more than a few $1 billion that your police are stealing with malice aforethought. How do we know? Well, you're going to see video, if not live. We are filming this, by the way, just so you're not confused. I film my show every day live, but then we give it to one of our chief IT person, who then breaks it into sections, gives one section to Facebook, that's the health and nutrition section, but then the whole show goes on YouTube. And so you will see police filmed trying to explain why they took the money and what they did with it. Did you know they can keep it? Did you know if you're pulled over, they can keep the money and all they have to say is, I believe you were going to use this to buy drugs. That's all they have to say. Or they don't even have to say that. This is insane. This is how stupid we become as a nation, and why I'm going to keep bringing before you how we don't protest, we don't make it an issue, they get away with it. There's now, the issue is, if you're driving on a highway in America where at any time a single car was spotted or stopped that had drugs in it, the entire highway is now considered suspect, and therefore you being on the highway, you're automatically a suspect. Is that insane? Yes. Is that America? Or is that Stasi East Germany? Oh, we're already a police state. And also, I've got a few people who are going to tell you something what they feel about the Democrats today, including Jimmy Dore, and also a gentleman, I've never heard of him, but I listened to what he had to say. Someone from our audience sent it to me. And just someone speaking out. But he's just saying the truth and common sense. So there's a lot of Americans speaking out now. You wouldn't know it from the mainstream media. You wouldn't know how many blogs and how many postings are of people just telling the truth, or at least showing what's wrong and some solutions, because they've all been excluded. Oh, and how many of you have seen that commercial where it says, what's Watson, or whatever they're saying, book me this, and what was the author of that, and what year was this, and suddenly this little machine gives you back the answer? Well, I'm going to play it. You're going to see it. And Anonymous came up with this. And you're going to go, what? What did it just do? It's going to reveal a lot, especially about Amazon. Amazon. Is Amazon associated with the guy who owns the Washington Post? Did he get $500 million from the CIA? We'll talk about that. Let's begin. Scientific evidence that turmeric, which is the yellow spice used in curry dishes, helps diabetes. Now, here's what's important. I'm going to quote this, and then I'll put it into a different context. This is from Health Impact News, and This is from a Dr. Sinatra, medical doctor and cardiologist. And it says, the statistics on prediabetes and diabetes in this country are utterly frightening. This is the pandemic. About 25 million Americans have diabetes. It's now 30 million. And including a whopping 20% over the age of 60, and 80 million have prediabetes. That means you're overweight, you have metabolic syndrome, you have high blood pressure, and also known as insulin resistance or metabolic syndrome. These conditions lead to inflammatory and artery-destroying processes that produce serious cardiovascular problems. He's correct. But the best figure I could come up with, the most accurate figure, is 100 million. Could be as high as 120 million, which means that 1 out of every 3 people living in the United States, and we're even talking about children, 1 out of every 3 has prediabetes or diabetes, which means prediabetes, you're going to be diabetic, which means your life is going to be shortened, you're going to likely have a heart attack or a stroke, you're going to be overweight, you're going to be depressed, and you're going to suffer from a myriad of inflammatory conditions because diabetes is pro-inflammatory. That means your eyes are going to be deficient in nutrients. You're going to have oxidative stress, glaucoma, cataracts, macular degeneration. Your brain is going to be inflammatory. And you're going to have dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, memory loss quicker than otherwise. So you're going to be a sick puppy. You're going to die. You're going to be in pain. You're going to have toes amputated, legs amputated. You're going to have infections. If you go into a hospital and you don't have an infection when you go into the hospital, in one recent year, 80,000 plus Americans died from bed sores, completely preventable, ulcers of the skin, because of how stupid and riddled with incompetence hospital care is. No one should be dying of a bed sore, but we had 80,000. Did you read about it anywhere? Nope. It's just so common now, like MRSA infections. 30,000 dying, it's just common. Aspirin, bleeding, deaths from the stomach, taking your baby aspirin to prevent a stroke and then dying of a cardiovascular disease, heart attack because of homocysteine, but no one talks about it. That's why we talk about it. So, here's the deal. Turmeric has an ingredient in it called curcumin. That can help you with diabetes. It's very important. Here's what it says, quote, research clearly demonstrates that turmeric is a powerful natural preventative and therapeutic agent for diabetes. The most commonly prescribed pharmaceutical approach for diabetes 2 or diabetes mellitus is metformin, which is fraught with side effects, even though it is considered safer than other diabetic drugs with worse side effects. And then it goes on to talk about how curcumin interfered with this. And the study is entitled Curcumin Extract for Prevention of Type 2 Diabetes. And the conclusions, quote, from the study, and this is in the British Medical Journal, these findings suggest a glucose-lowering effect of curcuminoids in type 2 diabetes, which is partially due to decrease in serum FFAs, which may result in promoting fatty acid oxidation and utilization. So, take your curcumin if you're pre-diabetic or diabetic. Now, this is from the University of Utah, and it says, scientists are still exploring and debating when happiness most affects health, but there is, quote, no doubt that it can do so. In the most comprehensive review to date of studies on subjective well-being, a team of researchers concluded there is a connection between happiness and health and better wound healing, better immune system function, better emotional resilience. So here's the issue. Now, why do I say, with all the people I work with, that in order to be healthy, you first have to work on happiness? Because at any given time, and I'll go into this in great depth when Professor Bruce Lipton will be on the upcoming program to talk about the epigenetics of happiness. I'll just give you a brief overview. If your parents were not happy, let's say that you weren't wanted, you were not a wanted pregnancy, the doubt about you being born, about you being carried in your mother's womb, that creates an epigenetic vibration that you're actually feeling unwanted, unloved, even before you're officially born. That's epigenetics. If there's not love between your parents, you pick that up as a child. If you're not given attention by either parent, even if you're not abused, we're not talking about abuse, just neglected, that can impact your immune system. That can impact the development of your own conscious mind. But Bruce Lipton, who is phenomenal on this, will go into greater depth on this in an upcoming program. So we do know now from thousands of studies on epigenetics, it's a whole area of science now. The head you see in the picture is my producer. Just sit back, Richard. Sit back, thank you. Richard's going to be on the moment talk about something funny. And it is this. A gross simplification, but at least you'll get the idea. When you're fearful, angry, rageful, insecure, frightened, stressed, cortisol levels go up. What we call stress cascade goes up. Even if there's nothing real that's actually happening, our fight or flight response is immediate, instantaneous. Well, what if you're just angry about something? Doesn't matter. There'd be no difference between a lion attacking you in the wilds and you being angry that somehow you didn't get a return phone call. The immune system responds, well, that turns off the healing at the DNA level. And you want the immune system on. You want your biochemical reactions to life on. So they call it the on-off at the DNA level. Now, I'll explain that in greater detail when Bruce Lipton's on. But that's why when you're thinking happy thoughts, when you're around wonderful people, when you're around children, they're playing, and you're around nature, and dogs and cats that give us unconditional love. And dogs are actually hardwired genetically with two specific genes that manifest in the brain that keep them almost at a childlike level. So they're always looking to love us and get our attention. Well, when all that good thing's going on, when you have wonderful music that you enjoy, when you're eating healthy foods, when you're in a beautiful environment, it's turning on the happiness quotient, and you're feeling better, and your immune system responds. So happiness is the foundation upon which health exists. Unhappy, I don't care what you do. In my personal experience, and I've counseled a lot of people, it's happiness that determines the outcome of a condition, not just a nutritional protocol. And here is something else, and then we'll wrap this part of our program up. This is from the University of Southern California, and it's a study involving dementia. And here's what they say, quote, managing your lifestyle factors, such as not smoking or high blood pressure or depression, could prevent 1/3 of the world's dementia cases. This was published in The Lancet, and this was a special commission on dementia prevention, and it goes into how to prevent dementia. Well, it's good, and it's also dietary. If you put anti-inflammatory foods, cucumbers in your salads, tomatoes in your salads, watercress, these are all anti-inflammatory alkaline foods, terrific for you. Carrots as well. If you have brown rice instead of white rice, if you have quinoa, if you have coconut oil, 2 tablespoons of coconut oil for 3 months does tremendous benefit to the brain of a person with Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, multiple sclerosis. So now they're finally confirming it. But to finish that off, to show it's not alone, this is a separate study. This is from San Francisco University. They're, quote, a diet rich in fish, fresh vegetables, fruits, and nuts could help cut the risk of dementia. And this was presented at the Alzheimer's Association International Conference in London. And it was links between diet and dementia were found, and they looked at 6,000 people, They followed them, and they found a 35% reduction in dementia when they had a healthy diet. Now, mind you, that's not even exercise, and that's not stress management, and that's not special supplementation. If I mention, do you know about glycerylphosphorylcholine, they go, what? Well, that's a very important nutrient if you have dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, or ALS. So there's a whole field of special nutrients that help rebuild the neurons in the brain and rebuild PPQ and NAD, rebuilding the mitochondria. This is just with this simple diet, and they're getting great results. So imagine if you had a great diet, not just a simple diet, and you had the supplements and you had the exercise. Well, then you can see how we're able to have such great progress with dementia and Alzheimer's. And before we go to our break, turns out maple syrup is anti-carcinogenic. This is from Kennedy University in Japan. Quote, dark colored syrup is healthier than lightly colored syrup. Maple syrup is a classic natural sweetener that's been making a comeback recently as an alternative to refined sugar. And the syrup is tapped from different species of maple trees, with the Canadian province of Quebec being the top producer. And along with a rich and complex flavor, maple syrup offers an abundance of amino acids, manganese, zinc, and phenolic compounds, including lignans and coumarin. A new study called Inhibitory Effects of Maple Syrup on the Cell Growth and Invasion of Human Colorectal Cancer Cells by Dr. Yamamoto, a molecular and cell biologist on the faculty of pharmacy at the university in Osaka, Japan, shows that it helps prevent cancer. So, dark maple syrup helps you with cancer, especially in this case, colorectal cancer. Now you got, along with coconut sugar and stevia, you've got some natural sweeteners. Now, before we go to our break, I want to play a short clip. Now, this is in Florida, where there's a movement now to help legalize marijuana, especially medical marijuana. And medical marijuana is different than the marijuana most people smoke, because you're isolating certain fractions called the cannabinoids, and these are in the oils, and these have an incredibly beneficial effects. Now, I sent a whole package of scientific peer-reviewed literature on this, but no one seems to have paid attention to it. But here's your typical throw them in jail, double down, like our current Attorney General. He wants to come back with even harsher criminal penalties if you've been caught with marijuana or any drugs, Jeff Sessions. But I want you to hear what they sound like in their own words, and then we're going to our own in-house scholar and executive producer, Richard Gale, to respond to this gentleman.
I don't believe that medical marijuana exists. I just don't. Some of us may believe that medical marijuana exists, but in point of fact, you will find no convincing scientific evidence that proves that point.
If you're listening right now, that was a mother who took some cannabinoid in a syringe, and you see the daughter in uncontrollable shaking. She's having a seizure. And the mother injects this into her mouth, and within 1 to 2 minutes, she's completely normal. I can't tell you how many people I know who have brain tumors and who have seizures have been able to get rid of them using cannabinoids. In the studio is Richard Gale. Hi, Richard.
Good afternoon, Gary.
Okay, let's offer.
Go look at this.
Let's offer. You offer this gentleman.
There's three different things that came to my mind. One is this particular Florida was he a senator?
Representative.
And people like Jeff Sessions and many in the Bush administration and the GOP that want to continue to outlaw, ban, and criminalize marijuana. these are people who are very devout Christians, are Christian Taliban in this country, and it's kind of funny because of the use of marijuana you find in the Bible. And marijuana appears 5 times in the Bible. It was used. The word itself, cannabis in Hebrew, and also another word that's cannabosom. It was one of the primary ingredients in the incense burned in the temple in Jerusalem. It was also the primary ingredient of the oils that Moses and the others would anoint themselves when they went into the meeting tent to pray to God. And of course, it was there was a really funny one actually in the book of Isaiah, where because the Jews are always disobeying God, and they're getting in trouble, and they're not worshiping properly. They're not giving the proper offerings. And so God reprimands in the book of Isaiah. He's reprimanding the Hebrews by saying, "You're not giving me enough kanaba. You're not offering me enough. Instead, you offer me all your sins. I want more kanaba."
God's a big pothead. That's what you're saying.
He was a pothead, and you find this throughout. And so it's kind of interesting that here, going back, I mean, it's really going back to the book of Genesis, which says, when God says, I gave all plants, all flowering plants, all the fruits of the trees for you. And all of them have use. All of them have some kind of a use to be found. Going to the medical side, though, there are 2 ways of looking at it. One is what's happening in the corporate world around marijuana. That's kind of always an interesting one because it gives us an indication of something. Here's a quote of Hugh Grant, Monsanto's CEO, to his shareholders last year. And he was praising their laboratories, the Monsanto laboratories, for isolating the DNA, RNA molecules of certain marijuana strains to combat cancer cells. All right, so this is over and beyond just the medical literature. This is their own thing. Monsanto's already been genetically engineering marijuana. Pharmaceutical companies are buying huge amounts of agricultural land in preparation for the time when the whole medical marijuana industry goes into the pharmaceutical hands and out of the hands of just individual farmers and pot growers like in Colorado.
Because by doing the research, they can patent the DNA, and therefore they would be the only ones allowed by law to use medical marijuana. It would be a $200 to $300 billion a year industry for them.
It's enormous.
But they have every interest in keeping it illegal, just like the alcohol industry once pot made illegal, because why did most people drink? Well, most people drink because it gives them that lightness of being where they can confront issues or talk about issues without having to filter or block or self-censor. And marijuana gives that sense of lightness of being. I've never used marijuana, and I don't drink alcohol, but I do not believe any of this should be criminalized, because what do you get from it except all these corporations trying to profit from it?
And there's so many people who have gained so much benefit. But on the medical side of things, to begin with, our brains, we have cannabinoid receptors in our brain. I mean, this is marijuana, the cannabinoids, the CBCs, the active pharmaceutical agents of marijuana are not something foreign to our bodies, just as we have natural opioid receptors. So one study that was done where they actually they intentionally blocked the cannabinoid receptors in mice, found that the mice were all Alzheimer's was induced throughout the mice. So now there has been research where for that the marijuana will block the amyloid buildup in the brain in order to prevent Alzheimer's, things like dementia. I'm just going to give a couple quick headlines. These are scientific headlines. Every day when I pull different health news that you hear on the broadcast, and this is only within the last five months, okay, of different studies. And I selected I wanted, and there was more than this, but these are the ones. So just to give a kind of a scope, a larger scope of just the many medicinal properties of marijuana. St. George's University of London, new study shows cannabis kills leukemia cells. Here's the University of Illinois last month, low dose THC. Now this is THC. This is the other ingredient, not the CBC. Can relieve stress. But in low doses, more higher doses will increase stress. So it's almost, there's a homeopathic kind of property that goes along if you're taking almost small amounts of THC that you wouldn't get high from, but just in minute doses will relieve stress. University of Bonn and Hebrew University did a group thing where cannabis reversed the aging processes in the brain. Ben Gurion University in Israel, interesting you find that these are in Israel doing all the research on this. Cannabinoids and in the elderly, it was a review of all the different medical research concerning CBC for marijuana and found how it benefits Parkinson's and dementia and relieves. That was Ben Gurion University. Here was another one from Israel, from Shar Zedek Medical Center. It was first of its kind study found that cannabis could be the miracle treatment for autistic children. University of Connecticut, an April study. Active ingredients in both the hot peppers and marijuana. There's a similar molecule they found calm the gut's immune system and will promote a better microbiome and gut bacteria. University of Colorado in April, cannabinoids soothe certain skin diseases. So it's used as a salve, and I know that for a fact. Once when I put my hand through stinging nettles high up in the Himalayas years ago, and it was in Himalayan stinging nettles are some of the worst. And this little servant boy at the little lodge I was staying in ran in the backwoods, grabbed a big marijuana plant, started rubbing it into my hand, and I was relieved completely immediately. University of Birmingham last March, component of marijuana will treat anxiety and substance abuse disorders. And here was one from Shanghai University, Shanghai Medical College, and cannabis is a very commonly used medicinal plant in traditional Chinese medicine. Cannabis exerts powerful neuroprotective effects and may soon be used in stroke and cardiac emergencies. So those are just a couple of
okay,
finally, so many more.
Finally, if this legislator or any legislator or the attorney general or any state's attorney or any police officer or any narcotics division were to go to the PubMed, which is the government's official source, and through there also the National Academy of Medicine and the Library of Medicine. Those are your three primary sources of what the government considers quality information that can be used by them to make decisions. That's what the congressional hearings get. That's what all of the American Cancer or the National Cancer Institute, the FDA, CDC. This is their repository. In their own repository, in their own data of studies, how many studies do you think are there on
I
cannabis?
did the search, but I only did a search for CBC cannabinoids, not THC, which is the ingredient that you get high from. But for cannabinoids alone, there were 22,150.
Okay, so here's what I'd like to do.
Citations.
Good, thank you on that. So for the listeners right now and viewers, and you'll be able to watch this on Facebook and watch it also, the whole program tomorrow on. There's a day delay in when we post it. If you live in Florida, please send this information over to that legislator. And in fact, if you really want to do some good, take a summary. And today, Richard, or by tomorrow, Richard will post a summary of just some abstracts, and you can link to them, and then give that to the legislators, every legislator, because you can cut and paste to every legislator in Florida. So at least they cannot say there's, like this gentleman. I'm going to play that little clip, just only 20 seconds. I want you to hear what he says, because he's a powerful member of the legislature in Florida, and he is influential in whether or not they legalize or don't. So he is saying the following. Please listen to what he's saying, because I'm not misquoting him.
I don't believe that medical marijuana exists. I just don't. Some of us may believe that medical marijuana exists, but in point of fact, you will find no convincing scientific evidence that proves that point.
Okay, there you've got it. And we have, as you just heard, and we're only looking at one fraction, just one fraction, 22,000 studies. All right? He may just be being propagandized by lobbyists who are giving him the data and talking points. Generally, that happens to a lot of legislators. Or he just may be biased, or he may be just not wanting to do his homework. But his recommendations are going to impact everyone in Florida. And what was interesting is 2 weeks ago I played a judge, a retired judge, who had sent people to prison for using marijuana. And he's one of these real anal, if you did it, you're guilty, and that's it, you're going to pay the price. And yet he had life-ending lung condition, and it was suggested that he take this. He didn't want to. He was against it. He took it to save his life and cured him. Now he's there as an advocate, and he's in Florida. All right. So a judge who filled the prison cells with people using marijuana, then had his own life saved. Boy, the hypocrisy. When you only have that truth, you only have your epiphany when you see something happening in your own life. And that's the danger of having certainty about everything. So 22,000 studies exist. We will poll today. We will collect, or by tomorrow, go to prn.fm, and then Jesse will post actual peer review, Library of Medicine, best science that no one can refute because it's the government's own site. Okay, it's there for, or I should say the government is pulling for that information, and then share it with it. We have a lot of people listening now from Florida, so take it upon yourselves. Flood that legislature with this information. We'll provide the information. We'll provide the studies. We'll provide the abstracts. You just get it to the people. Paula, up there with your husband and near Tampa or St. Peter, Orlando, somewhere up there. You're both retired. Make this a project, because think of the thousands, hundreds of thousands of Floridians who are suffering from dementia and seizures and cancers who could benefit from this. Thank you, Richard. Now, we have something new that we're going to be doing. We're going to have every week all the information about environmental issues on our site. And again, everything on our site, all the information is free, and we like to give a wide variety. But I want to start today by sharing just what's brand new. You may not have heard of any of this. And this is why we must pay attention to global warming, and then I'll give you suggestions what we individually and collectively can do about it. This is just all brand new, recent. We're not talking about a long time ago or a year ago or half a year ago. This is brand new. Well, we had May 2nd, the warmest day on record, June 4th, the warmest day in history on June 4th. Wildfires. Okay, as of just this Monday, 14 large wildfires burning through California, 14 in Nevada, 20 in Arizona, 7 in Oregon, 1 in Montana, and 7 in Washington State. We've had, quote, on July 10th, thousands flee wildfires in California as blazes continue across U.S. and Canada. Major forest fires were in Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, and Colorado. Wildfires in southern Georgia burns 100,000 acres, forcing multiple evacuations. Florida on fire, 125 different fires. Quote, worst wildfire season ever. Now, I was on the road, and I got a call from my caretaker saying, better get down here. So we immediately started thank goodness I prevent things. I don't, I have backup, I have solar backup redundancy if power goes out, which it just did today, by the way, when I was on the phone saying how things are going. All the power went out. Well, not with us, because I had backup. But this is a suggestion for everyone here. Take a simple irrigation hose. run it across the top of all your buildings, then down the sides, underneath eaves, so that if there is a fire, you turn that on and your entire building is wet. It stays on. Now, if you do that with all your sheds and buildings, and then also around your trees that might also get affected, and you put it onto a higher pressure so it can shoot up to 40 feet in the air. So you're flooding everything if a fire's coming. And then you also have backup sitting in your garage or your basement, backup fire retardant foam that you can spray on the roof and on the sides. And that takes maybe, if it gets that close, and the big fires came within 1 block of my property, and we had everything ready to go and moving all the animals into a safe area. I do rescue. People bring me animals that are damaged, and I can find them homes, rehabilitate them. So I had that all planned, so they're safe. The inhabitants are safe. And even, it's not expensive, buy yourself some fire suits. They're not expensive. So your whole body is at least covered. So if you're ever in a situation where you got to run through fire or something's on fire and you got to go through that fire to escape, at least you're not going to get 2nd, 3rd degree burns. You're going to be protected. Now, if you really want to be protected, you put the fire suit on and you got to run, you get the fire retardant, you spray it on yourself and you run right through it. Simple things, non-expensive things. Save your house, save your car. You could cover your whole car in fire retardant. So there are things you can do. And as a result, I didn't lose a single thing. All around me people did, but I didn't. And I wish that they could learn from that, because I'm out there to help my neighbors as well. Also, we had 142 active fires separately 3 days later in Florida. And in June, huge forest fires in Portland and killed people. In Croatia and Portugal, 60 people died in one fire. In Croatia, wildfires are raging on the outskirts of Split, and I just posted it. It looks like it's typical beautiful architecture, but it's stepped, meaning you get buildings going up a slope, and the entire thing is a ball of fire. Every single story, every single street, everything is on fire, and yet not a word in America. And then the drought, severe drought, Somalia, Ethiopia, Kenya, and the United Nations suddenly asked for $1.9 billion in relief aid. But also millions of people in Malawi, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Tanzania haven't seen a single drop of rain in over a year, and they can't grow things. Then we had the 2nd longest drought in agricultural history in Murcia in Spain, and it's turned the soil from fertile soil into white, lifeless sand. Now, I know people were going to move there because it's so aesthetically beautiful, and the Spanish people are so wonderful. And I said at the time, you don't have aquifers here. You're not checking your water. Oh, but it's so beautiful, and the land's inexpensive. But what happens if? And that was just 5 years ago I gave them that advice. Now, if is there. So their land is worth nothing. Nothing can grow. They can't get water in. High temperatures recorded in Brazil, and in the hottest day in their history there, in Manaus, which, by the way, is in the Amazon. It's not a little town. There's 2 million people living there, and it's the hottest day they've ever recorded in history. You can't be outside for more than 5 minutes. And then we have torrential rains. In fact, we've had some of the worst flooding ever recorded in the last 60 days. In Istanbul, it flooded out their entire metro system. Homes evacuated in Cornwall in England in the last 2 days. In fact, in the last 2 days, yesterday, in parts of England, they had 30 days worth of rain in 2 hours. So much rain, and they're at sea level. There's no place for that water to go. So there you had rushing, 4 feet high rushing of water in places that are not used to having any rushing water. So now they're having to cope with that. And let's say nobody gets killed, which is what we hope for. What do you think is going to happen when you have these surges of water and coming from flash flooding, and you get 4 feet of water in your house, in your basement, you're going to have massive mold. You're going to have to rip stuff out. You're going to be affected unless it's done properly. Gets in the boards. Lima, Peru's, quote, time bomb. Mudslides all over Peru in Lima, the capital, and threatens this self-built city. Because if you've ever been to South America, some of these cities, beautiful cities, but they're on the sides of mountains or at the base of mountains, and now there's so much rain that the watershed, meaning your trees and your shrub on the sides of hill, hold into the root system, into the body of the tree, thousands of gallons of water. There's no more room. So whole chunks of land, huge chunks of land, the size of football fields, are just giving way, and all those hundreds of millions of tons are going right down and crashing into houses, buildings, and this is all around it. In Colombia, 301 people died in one town, Mocoa. And in another flood and landslide in Sri Lanka, killed 150 people. Also recently, Princeton Rutgers Universities said all the United States coastline faces an average risk of 100-year floods, meaning only once in 100 years we have it. But now they've increased that to 40-fold. You're talking about a 4,000% increase in just the next 25 years. So we're going to be having every year once in 100-year floods. Earthquakes. Let's just go by today. Montana, 5.8 earthquake. Nepal, 2 separate ones of 5+. Tibet, 4.1. Hawaii, 5.3. Goa, India, 4.8. But in Mexico, 6.9. That's a killer. And also, they have a cyclone now destroying homes in Madagascar, affecting the displacement of 434,000 people. 434,000 people gone. Have you seen a single word about this in the media? None. 4 people missing after a tsunami hits a remote Greenland village. In Moscow, 13 deaths from freak winds. Went from no wind to extremely high, brutal wind. 10 million people need to move from Bangladesh because of the increasing water. And the Australian National University, just this week, said that today's extreme heat is going to become the norm. Now, that's just what I'm going to report today, but I'm going to post here, just in the United States, flooding. And flooding in every one of the towns and areas in the United States. And this is just in the last week. This week we're in now. And how many do I have? Oh, I have about 100 here. Wildfires also, and the operation aimed to contain them, and the type of disaster and where it's at in Sevierville, Tennessee, and all these other places. So we don't know about these things because it's not an important story. We need important story like Russia, like that's important, right? So all around us, we're running out of water. We're flooding with too much water. We have drought that's not allowing things to be harvested or things to grow. We have thousands of fires around the world. We have earthquakes. We have tornadoes. We have excessive wind. And as if none of this matters because it's not political. There's no advocate for it. 4 things you can do to make a difference immediately. First, stop living in places that are not sustainable. And that's a big one because nature is not going to change because you like the sunset. So just wake up to that. That's very important. Next, go vegan. There's nothing that we can do on the entire planet to mitigate global warming quicker or more completely than going from a meat to a plant-based diet. Next, save the forest we have. Lobby to protect our national forest from exploitation and our resources. Next, plant trees. Recently in India, in one day, they planted 66 million trees in one day. You've heard me say many times that we should have a new form of the Civil Conservation Commission that they had during the middle of the Depression to help reforest America. Well, we need one now where we can hire people at a living wage to plant trees in every community, in every state in America. We should be able to plant at least 10 billion trees. 10 billion. If we did that, then we're creating carbon sinks. Instead of the heat going up, as it would in a field, a lawn, it will stay anchored in. And it will green America. That also allows us to create new soil. And stop consuming so much. We're an over-consuming society, and there's obsolescence, meaning that manufacturers make things so cheaply because they're using exploited cheap labor that when it breaks, instead of fixing it, you just throw it away. And it ends up in a Pacific Ocean plastic patch, twice the size of Texas. These are things we have control over. Our body politic at this time, till we get a third party, we don't. Now I'm going to play two short pieces. One is from Jimmy Dore, because Jimmy, who's a good progressive, just wanted to let you know one of the reasons that the Democrats lost, that they haven't been able to acknowledge, and until they do, they're not going to go any further. Please listen. It's only 2 minutes long.
So the Democrats are lost. They're wiped out at every level. We've talked about this. And, you would say leading the Democrats would be like herding squirrels, but let's face it, even squirrels have a certain amount of self-sufficiency. I mean, the Democrats wouldn't even be able to gather food without a donor's approval. You know that. So that's why they're wiped out, and they're pretending like they don't get it. They don't get why they're wiped out. But they all know why they're wiped out, because they don't represent people anymore. They on purpose decided to turn their backs on working class people and get in bed with Wall Street, the military-industrial complex, Big Pharma, and Silicon Valley. So now they became Republicans. That's supposed to be the party of the Republicans. So now the Democrats they've got no place to go, which is why lots of them voted for Trump and lots of them didn't vote. And or lots of them voted for Jill Stein. That's what I did.
Okay, Jimmy. There's a lot being done. Gerald Celente worked with myself and Dr. Robert Thurman, who's going to be on the program, I believe, tomorrow, talking about China and Tibet and the PR campaign to make us believe that China is doing something good when they're not in Tibet. But there was Robert Thurman, Medea Benjamin, myself, and Gerald Celente, and Ralph Nader. And we formed, through Gerald, it was his brainchild, he gets the credit for this, Occupy Peace and Prosperity, where we look at how to make the world prosperous again, we the people again. One simple little thing. I'll just show you how simple this is. And we go for peace. We become an active peace advocate, meaning we protest against military spending instead of social spending. But there's a movement underway, and I want to commend these people. Boy, you're doing a good job. Whoever came up with this idea, kudos to you. And we'll try to find out who created this so we can bring them on the program. But I just saw a video, and I posted it. It's a short clip, and it shows turning lawns into functional and vegetable gardens. And here's what they do. A group of volunteers go down a street, and they speak with the owner and say, let us work with your lawn. It doesn't cost you a nickel. You don't have to put a penny into it. No work, nothing. And we'll give you a nice percentage of everything that grows for your own use. And so they go in and they grow organic, non-GMO seeds, and they rebuild the soil, which helps then they take food and they give that to homeless people, and they have a kitchen where they make meals, healthy, organic foods. And they're all volunteers doing this. And they're impacting one street after another. So now people are saying, wow, you mean you'll come in and take my just grass and make it into a lawn? Yes. So it's a great idea. Imagine if we start doing that all across the country. I 100% support this. So there is a movement. But there are also Americans, and they're not being heard, and that's a mistake. Democrats, you failed. You've sold out. And the liberals who belong to you, the Clintons, are not liberal. They're not true liberal. They're never progressive. In fact, a lot of the once true liberals have now become progressive just to separate themselves because so much has been compromised. The pro-war liberals, the Democrats that are pro-war and believe that we should be intervening and bombing in countries, including Bernie Sanders. That's why first time around, he can fool the young people. But the young people are very capable of educating themselves fast. There's a big contingent within the millennial movement that wants peace and prosperity. And so we're counting upon them to separate themselves out from the Democrats, not be absorbed into the Democrats. And that's what Bernie was going to do. And instead, we will be coming at you. Thousands of wise men and women with tens of millions of younger people to change our society. Here's just one of those people making some statements. I didn't know who this guy is, but what he has to say, listen to what he has to say. I realize some of the stations can't stay on board and listen to all this because we're at their 55 minutes, but if you can, it's worth hearing what one man says, but there are 100,000 people like this man going to the internet and just sharing a few of their thoughts. Please listen.
What if I went into your neighbor's yard, shot their dog, and told them that you hired me to do that? If you live in the United States, that is what your government is doing to you right now. They're going into country after country. While the mainstream press is strangely silent, they're going to Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, Syria, Pakistan, Turkey, Libya, and others. They're simply bombing whatever they want to bomb, killing whoever they want to kill, destroying whatever they choose to destroy without legal grounds, without the agreement of other nations, in blatant violations of international treaties back as far as Geneva Convention. We are the new global villain. And your flag, your face, is becoming the symbol for those campaigns. As Germany was in 1939, America is today, bringing unprovoked horror and death to a host of countries, countless communities where no threat of any kind to our nation has been demonstrated in any public way. Our military, our government, that corporate deep state that the mainstream media seems to be unable to even speak of, are committing those acts of war, actually war crimes, in your name. They have shot your neighbor's dog, and it looks like you are okay with that. Just as the German people cheered for Hitler, Americans are thinking that these inexcusable actions are somehow going to make them safe, when the opposite is absolutely guaranteed. By these endless atrocities, our military is not only inviting more and more terrorism, they are causing Russia and China and all their allies to align against us, just as the world aligned against Germany and Japan in World War II. Tragic history has shown us that it was not just the German government and leaders who were taken down. Common German people were humiliated, starved, tortured, and killed after World War II. The German people themselves, men, women, and children, were blamed and punished for what their elected leaders had done. If you are not on the record opposing the United States global tyranny and wholesale slaughter of innocent foreigners on their own soil, you are likely to become a target yourself sometime in the future. Do you look like an American? Imagine what would happen if you set foot in a Muslim country which has been bombed or invaded by our military. When someone has pulled their dead children out of their crumbled masonry houses, how do you think those people will treat you if they ever come face to face with you? Any war is bad enough, but the kind of war that the United States is conducting is the worst of the worst. One-sided bullying, unprovoked invasion, exploitation of other countries' resources under the pretense of weaponized political crusades against randomly selected targets. Innocent populations losing their homes, their lives, their loved ones, and many of them having no idea why it is even happening. There's no amount of propaganda, diplomacy, or foreign aid that can come close to repairing what our military is doing and has done. There is no rationalization which can reasonably be put forward to claim that our young soldiers are dying and losing their limbs for any good cause. Are we also brainwashed that we can't even utter an anti-war opinion while this is going on? The Confederate flag is being banned everywhere in our country because, to many, it represents slavery, bigotry, and injustice. The Nazi flag is a symbol of genocide. What does the American flag represent to the rest of the world now that we have flown that flag, as we have invaded their countries, destroyed their homes, and killed their friends and loved ones? How will our flag be regarded by the world from now on? You will see a time when simply flying that flag.
Just a person's views. I thought that he was right on. Those are my thoughts. We have to take a position. If we don't, then we've taken a position. We have become compliant. When we know of misdeeds, when we know of the aggression of those in power, the deep state and their vassals, and we choose to stay silent because we either don't want to become involved, we're fearful, or we don't care, then we're giving them the power of choice that should be reserved for us to make intelligent and humane and spiritual choices. I'm Gary Null. Thank you all for listening. Look forward to sharing more tomorrow. Have a nice day, everyone.